Hi there, my name is David O'Shea, and I'm going to be presenting why Taters Inc. should adopt Linux Mint 20.1 as their new operating system. Taters Inc.'s business objectives: they run a potato processing facility making potato products. Taters Inc. needs an operating system that can support 268 workstations working across 8 different departments with 451 employees. Taters Inc. is currently running Windows 7 OS, but would like to upgrade to a newer OS. All of Tater Inc.'s servers run Windows Server 2012 R2 systems. The OS must support these systems. I tested 3 separate operating systems: Mint, Ubuntu, and Android, and I decided that Mint would best fulfill Tater Inc.'s business objectives. The history of Linux Mint. Linux Mint is a community-driven Linux distribution based on Ubuntu, which is based on the Debian operating system. Linux Mint's first stable version, Barbara, was released on August 27th, 2006. The Linux Mint project was created by, I might get this wrong, Clement Lefebvre, and is maintained by the Linux Mint team. Linux having software like Java and Flash already installed on its disk set it apart from Ubuntu. Also, Ubuntu has more desktop environments than Mint. Linux gives codenames to each of its new OS versions, and Linux Mint 20.1's is Ulissa. Linux Mint 20.1 attributes. Linux Mint 20.1 comes in 3 different flavors, each with a different desktop environment. Cinnamon, the most modern desktop, full-featured desktop. Mate, more stable than Cinnamon, has faster speed. XFCE, lightweight, very stable, doesn't support as many features as Cinnamon. Cinnamon is the default interface for Linux Mint. Most of my presentation will be done from a Cinnamon perspective because it's the environment that I chose. While these aren't all the additions to Linux Mint 20.1, these are just the ones I've listed. Linux Mint 20.1 has introduced Web App Manager, which lets you turn any website into a desktop application. Linux Mint 21.1 has a new Add to Your Favorites option, which makes it easier to access files you regularly use. Picture courtesy of blog.linuxmint.com. Linux Mint and Android's similarities and differences. Both are open source, which means you can modify the software without needing a license. Both OSs come from the Linux kernel, but the Android is not a GNU Linux distribution. I think it's, I forget, it's Canonical or something. That's what it's on. Linux supports multiple architectures. Android only supports ARM and x86 architectures. Android was developed to run on mobile phones, mobile internet devices. Linux was developed to run on desktops, servers, mostly business stuff. Android frequently updates its distributions. Linux updates OSs every 5 years. Linux and Ubuntu similarities. Linux Mint was based off Linux Ubuntu, which is a fork of the Debian system. Both have similar gaming and programming abilities, but there not being much of a difference. Both Mint and Ubuntu have a software management system that allow you to acquire new software. Both are very active online communities. Both are good for beginners as they're easy to install, not that hard to operate. Picture courtesy of Chase Dizzy. Linux Mint and Ubuntu differences. Mint's operating system more resembles Windows OS, or Ubuntu's operating system more resembles Mac OS. Some say it's easier to configure Linux Mint than Linux Ubuntu. Linux Mint works better on older hardware because of less stringent hardware running requirements. Linux Mint 20.1 Cinnamon consumes less memory than Linux Ubuntu GNOME. Linux Mint 20.1 Cinnamon comes with more useful pre-installed applications such as Flash, Java, Pigeon, or Ubuntu does have some pre-installed applications. They are not as useful. Now we're on to Linux Mint 20.1 and Windows 10 differences. Linux Mint 20.1 is fundamentally different from Windows 10. Linux Mint 20.1 is a free operating system, whereas you must pay for the Windows 10 license to install it. Linux Mint 20.1 is a general public license, which allows users to modify their software, whereas Windows 10 has a commercial license, which keeps people from modifying Windows software. Linux Mint 20.1 allows you to log into the terminal right away. In Windows 10, you have to download a tool to use the terminal. Linux Mint 20.1 users have access to the source code of their OS. Windows users do not. It's much easier to install and maintain development packages in Linux Mint 20.1 than in Windows 10. Linux Mint 20.1 Cinnamon runs faster on older hardware than Windows 10, which sometimes does not run on anything earlier than 2015. Linux apps are free. Windows has some free apps, but will charge you to use most of their apps. Linux is usually used on servers for security purposes at companies like Google, Facebook, Windows, and Windows is mostly used by gamers through Xbox and for business purposes. Linux is highly secure because it is easier to identify bugs in it. Windows has a larger user base that is less secure and has become a target for developers of viruses and malware. Linux does not collect user data. Windows does, and they've been guilty of it before. And Linux, they not that I know of, have ever been caught get people's information or collecting it. Windows often needs to be rebooted to install updates and then makes you reschedule a time to update. Linux lets you update whenever you want and does not need to reboot the operating system to update applications. Linux has support for many online community forums. Windows has some online forums, but it is paid support, so you can't fully trust the information you receive. Picture courtesy of switchtolinux.com. Alright, now I'm going to take a look at my operating system here. It's rather bare display. I took most of the icons off of the desktop. Here are my 5 applications. Start with my first. This is Kapow Punch Clock. It can be used to track employees clocking in and clocking out, and you could also use it to check when you last billed somebody. Once you press stop, it's saved as like a file kind of, and yeah, it can keep you from having to go back. Okay. See date, start time, stop time. My next app is someone you're probably familiar with. It's called Skype. You use it to call people, have video messages. They have to have a Skype account as well, a phone number. Nope. It can be used for video conferencing or just messaging from person to person. A third app is GNU Cache. It's basically it's kind of like an accounting tool, and you can use it for individuals or for businesses. You can keep track of like stocks, of your portfolio, a lot of stuff. Gives you information on what the account is, what the account is for. Okay, how many examples here? All right. This is Gparted. You use this to see how your devices are running and like start a partition table. As you can see here, all of your devices. It can come in handy from an IT perspective because you have to know how how your disks are doing. And last, this app is called Firewall. Well, technically a firewall configuration. It lets you assign rules to your firewall so that you don't let certain ports in. That certain people can be blocked, and what rules it has to follow. It is masquerading. As you set up a host or a router, connects your local network to the internet. Ports and protocols and destination services. Okay, as all my apps. I'm gonna go back to my presentation. There are some downsides to using Linux Mint 20.1. Linux Mint 20.1 is not as popular as the other operating systems, so it may be harder to find answers to certain hardware software issues. You can subscribe to Enterprise Linux, which offers some technical help, but there is no official help desk for Linux Mint 20.1. There are not as many professional software programs that run on Linux Mint 20.1. Some software programs will not run in Linux Mint 20.1, but you can look for Linux alternatives like LibreOffice and Thunderbird. Some hardware drivers are not compatible with Linux Mint 20.1. It can be an issue because it's not really as popular as Windows and Mac. And then while it's like older hardware, it can run on it. Some hardware just does not configure with Linux Mint. Gaming is easier on a Windows desktop because most games are built for Windows. because of Xbox, but not for Linux. Why Taters Inc. should adopt Linux Mint 20.1 as their operating system. Linux Mint 20.1 is free and open source, so you will save a fair amount of money on installation. You can make changes to the source code without needing a license. Linux Mint 20.1 Cinnamon feels similar to Windows, so those familiar to Windows will not have to make much of an adjustment. Linux Mint 20.1 is a good OS for beginners who might not be familiar with Linux OS, as it is pretty easy to navigate. Most of your essential apps are pre-installed in Linux Mint 20.1. You have the option to download more through the software manager. Linux Mint 20.1 is easy to configure with the ability to change the theme of the desktop, the files, icon buttons, icon button colors, and much more. This is continued why Taters Inc. should adopt Linux Mint 20.1 as their operating system. Linux Mint 20.1 has applications that can help Taters Inc. run its facility more efficiently and help on the corporate side by making communication easier. Linux Mint 20.1 will be supported for another 4 years, so there is no need to worry about needing an upgrade or having your server systems become incompatible with a new OS. Linux Mint 20.1 can perform multiple operations at once without the system slowing down, which is good because the screen freeze can waste a lot of time. So it's a good feature of Linux Mint. Linux Mint 20.1, in Linux Mint 20.1, you do not need to install antivirus software. Linux Mint 20.1 has many developers that keep an eye out for virus-related things. This is very important because a cybersecurity breach like what happened to Microsoft or Google could cause Taters Inc. to lose a company data or hamper facility operations. Picture courtesy of www.flickr.com/jakepc123. Linux Mint 20.1 is my idea of what an operating system should be. Easy to install, easy to edit, configure, and not susceptible to being hacked. Linux Mint 20.1 can be integrated into Taters Inc. servers easily and not cause a big delay in Taters Inc. operations. Many corporations run Linux as their OS, such as Google, Oracle, Dell, Amazon, and 33% of the other websites on the internet, so it's not a huge gamble. Linux Mint 20.1 is not a perfect OS. There's a lack of support from the professional software community and an inability to host some drivers, but there's usually a Linux option to download. Here are my citations from the web. Linux Mint 20.1 sponsors. Brandon Miller, 15 pros and cons of Linux. Linux versus Windows 10. P. Panemkar. Greg Markovich. Linux Mint versus Ubuntu, detailed comparison. It's Andre Prakash, 8 reasons why Linux Mint is better than Ubuntu for Linux beginners. Okay. Sorry if my words were a bit jumbled up. I should have maybe prepared a little bit better. But that was it. And I'm going to finish the stream.